Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we return to talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a super expansive, very world-renowned movie series that's even produced the highest-grossing film of all time, Avengers Endgame, amongst other multiple billion-dollar blockbusters. But a couple of famous, highly acclaimed, older movie directors have recently taken umbrage with the Marvel film series, mostly criticizing it for not being very well made or artistic or what they would call cinema. Most notably, Oscar-winning film director and world-famous storyteller Martin Scorsese recently chimed in saying Marvel movies aren't cinema specifically, whatever that means. I mean, it's hard to deny the guy is a movie-making legend here, and I would never in a million years say he's being stupid or wrong or offensive here, but I also don't know if I would agree with this statement either. Keeping in mind that Marty Scorsese is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time and also one of my personal favorites too, it's kind of hard to digest this. He's made such classics as Goodfellas, Casino, The Departed, The Wolf of Wall Street, and many others. And these are some all-time greatest hits right here, but at the same time, Scorsese might also be getting a little out of touch in his older years too, or more specifically, what Marty considers cinema is becoming more and more dated a bit, and certainly it's not what's being enjoyed as much in the mainstream these days either. Back in the day, classic films made by auteur directors used to be in the mainstream much more often, and darker films with more off-colored premises and more personal production could have actually had a chance at stealing some box office bucks just as much as Hollywood blockbusters would, like other popcorn movies and lighter fare, comedies and such. But these days, it's the popcorn movies and the less cerebral, more action-packed ones with comedy influences, well, those are the ones becoming much more relevant these days. Hence the recent wave of Marvel dominance in current year, and it's also resulted in many others trying to imitate their success. With all that said, in a way, Martin Scorsese is right here too. Marvel movies aren't cinema, not in the classic sense much at all at least. Sure, they're still well made and beautifully acted sometimes and well directed other times too, but the focus is more on the experience with these films and the fun of watching it and going along for the ride, as opposed to what classic cinema usually goes for, where it's more about the art, the style, the substance, or the message. But as far as I'm concerned, people can prefer either of these styles as they wish, and there's no real definitive side that's confirmed to be better than the other. They're just different, and it's all a matter of opinion too. Scorsese and his peers and their followers have their own preferences, while they seem to be more traditional and also a bit dated now. And in turn, Marvel movies and similar franchises have fans and they have their crowds too. And if it makes any difference here, Marvel's supporters vastly outnumber the classic cinema ones. And sure, another world-class director, the director of The Godfather, Francis Ford Coppola, he chimed in too to support Scorsese here, but first of all, this Coppola guy hasn't made a good movie in decades. And second, many more actors, directors, and producers on the Marvel side have stepped up and spoken out lately, and they're on the side that is, again, much more numerous, current, and relevant. And while I may sound like I'm teetering the line here between the two sides myself, I surely like material for both sides greatly, but at the same time, there was one recent person from the Marvel camp who attacked Scorsese and his stance in one of the most cringy and offensive and pro-SJW ways possible. But before we get to him though, let's talk about some of the other greats on the Marvel side who defended themselves without looking like jackasses. For example, Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man himself, he spoke on this recent controversy about a month ago on the Howard Stern Show. And RDJ was certainly smart enough to not try and ruffle Scorsese's feathers. He might have politely and directly pointed out his differences of opinion, but also Robert Downey Jr. showed great respect and affirmation for the acclaimed director and legend regardless of that, saying Scorsese has a right to think what he wants over and over. Next, Scarlett Johansson also made a similarly strong but respectful defense of Marvel movies as well, her being one of the signature characters, Black Widow of course. Here's a comicbook.com article with quotes that have Johansson saying this: "There's certainly a place for all kinds of cinema right now," Johansson says. "People absorb content in so many different ways. I actually didn't totally understand that statement because I guess I needed some insight as to what it meant exactly, because to me it seemed a little old-fashioned, but somebody pointed out to me that perhaps what the statement meant was that there's no room for smaller films because the cinema is taken up by these enormous blockbusters, and smaller movies don't have a chance at the theater, which I hadn't actually considered and I think is a valid point." Well put, Scarjo. She even brings up another angle here that many might not have considered, and one that sounds like it's very likely to be true. As I mentioned earlier, classy, auteur-made films like Scorsese's, they are having harder and harder times selling tickets at the box office office these days. With so many big-budget blockbuster action flicks taking over, and usually dominated by Marvel movies, there's really not much room for these artistic slow-burn pieces. In fact, this has become more apparent recently too, because although Scorsese's new film The Irishman is having a very brief run at theaters, just for award consideration's sake, but really, this will be his first release on a streaming platform, Netflix. And it makes sense too, since slow-building, long-winded 3.5-hour films like Scorsese's, they have a pretty rough time competing with all the other options in the actual cinemas, and competing with comedies and action blockbusters of the day. So, as Scarlett Johansson put it, perhaps this whole criticism of Marvel should be looked at differently, or at least looked at in a few different ways. Finally, let's get to the very, very bad reaction from Marvel's side, the one I spoke about earlier and alluded to in this video's title. As you might have guessed, the actor who plays Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman, he recently called out Martin Scorsese for criticizing Marvel movies, but he didn't clap back in a graceful or accurate or insightful way like RDJ or Scarlett Johansson. No, Black Panther decided to get woke with it and say that Martin Scorsese doesn't like his movie because he's white. That's right. This story started with a tweet from The Independent that says, Chadwick Boseman suggests Martin Scorsese didn't get Black Panther because he's white. Well, that's a pretty bold statement right there, considering all we've gone over already. With all that said, I'm pretty sure Martin Scorsese is smart enough to get Black Panther, or at the very least, he would have gotten it if he actually saw the movie. I doubt he even had enough time or really cared to watch it, but the point is, Black Panther also isn't some deep, serious head-scratcher of a picture which anyone would have trouble getting, let alone would a seasoned director like Scorsese not get it. And in addition, this whole situation has nothing to do with race whatsoever. Any kind of race could get any kind of movie with any kind of other race. But Black Panther thinks this is an issue because his film was surrounded by woke culture and supposedly in tune with black people and social justice warriors. And sure, this was meant to look like a real ethnic, urban kind of thing, but let's all keep in mind, the actual Black Panther character was created by Jewish comic book writers, and it was made famous by American white-run industries like the American comic book industry and the Hollywood filmmaking system. Regardless, Chadwick Boseman certainly comes off a little offensive here, and like he's trying to be woke and anti-white here too, and that's made even worse considering the fact that he's overvaluing himself and overhyping his own movie, which, make no mistake, Black Panther was decent and it was certainly a big hit, and it was even a cultural phenomenon at the time, and no one's denying that, but at the same time, it was also just an average comic book movie at best that had some really shitty CGI and had a recycled derivative plot as well. Really, Black Panther only got as big as it did because it had black people in it, and it also came out in the right series at the right time. Regardless, let's go ahead and read on into this article attached to this tweet and see what else Black Panther has to say. Chadwick Boseman has suggested that Martin Scorsese didn't get Black Panther because he didn't feel the mystery that black people felt when watching it for the first time. Scorsese recently revealed he had tried to watch movies from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but struggled because he feels they are not cinema and are lacking in mystery. The mystery that Scorsese is talking about is in Black Panther, he told BBC 5 Live. If he saw it, he didn't get that there was this feeling of not knowing what was going to happen that black people felt. We thought, white people will kill us off, so it's a possibility that we could be gone. Boseman, who also said he has to respect his opinion on Marvel films because he's a genius at what he does, continued, "We felt that angst. We felt that thing you would feel from cinema when we watched it. That's cultural. Maybe it's generational." Okay, well, settle down, buddy. And first of all, Chad, you're a 41-year-old African American from South Carolina, so I highly doubt you legitimately had to worry about quote-unquote white people trying to kill you off, as you put it. I don't think any race or any peoples have had to feel that way, possibly in all of American history, actually. Sure, we've had our disagreements and issues, and we've warred with various groups and nations over the years, but at no point were Americans just slaughtering people willy-nilly, and certainly that did not happen since 1977, which is the year this actor was born in. In fact, the Civil Rights Act passed in 1964, over a decade before Chadwick Boseman was even born. And sure, I don't doubt that some racism was worse in the South, in South Carolina in the 70s and 80s, around when Chad grew up there, but at the same time, this fear of being killed by whites he had is certainly being overstated and probably unnecessary. Boseman is playing up American racism clearly, and he's alluding to and overhyping racist groups that went extinct over 100 years ago, 50 years before he was even born. Perhaps Chad might have actually felt this way though himself, and I wouldn't be surprised if he did, considering the way he's talking now and the ways with which his community impunity will go to vilify whites. But just because you think people are racist murderers doesn't make that true. And just because you're scared for your life all the time doesn't mean the people you're scared of actually did anything wrong. A lot of that belief and that lifestyle is done by you and your people and your parents or whoever raised you. So when I hear a rich, pampered millionaire actor saying he's scared to be killed like this, instead of sympathizing with him and taking his fear to be justified and rational, I say he's a little off his rocker, or perhaps even he's been brainwashed and pressured into feeling this way when he really didn't have to. And as for all this relating to Black Panther, Scorsese, and Marvel movies, I don't even know if it really actually does. All I see is a broken, weak, troubled man named Chadwick Boseman, who seems to have an irrational fear of other races, perhaps because of his troubled upbringing, or he has some kind of undiagnosed delusional thoughts, anxiety problems, or even a slight issue with paranoia brought on by fear-mongering that was done to him at a young age. The actor also said Scorsese might have come forward with his views to get eyes on his new film, The Irishman. You've got to think about when he's saying it. Boseman, who's promoting 21 Bridges, added. He's saying it when he's possibly campaigning for an award. He's saying it at a time when he's making a Netflix movie, so that's how eyes get on his film. And it's not going to be in the cinemas. It's not going to be seen the best way. Last week, Scorsese was praised for writing an opinion piece for the New York Times, elaborating on why he compared Marvel films to theme park rides during an interview with Empire magazine. 21 Bridges is out in UK cinemas on November 22nd. The Irishman is out now in select cinemas before its Netflix release on November 27th. Well, that's a pretty ironic thing to criticize Marty for here, Chad. Not to stand for Scorsese too hard here, but of course he's talking about this stuff as his new movie is coming out now. He's doing loads of interviews and press junkets and answering many different questions, so this kind of thing is bound to come up. Now, do I think Scorsese was purposely trying to make a controversy to get attention for his film specifically? Maybe. It's kind of likely, but it also could have just been what he was going to say anyway, and the press turned it into a big story and controversy on their own. And the hypocrisy here comes when you realize Chadwick Boseman is just talking about this in press interviews for his own movie himself, and he is likely trying to get attention to his project by saying this too, the same thing he appears to be scolding Marty Scorsese for. In the end, while I may be on the fence and playing both sides here, both the classic cinema and pro-Marvel movie sides, one thing is for certain though, there was no need for Black Panther to bring Martin Scorsese's race into this. It certainly makes Chad himself look bigoted actually, and it also brings into question the quality of Black Panther and other Marvel films overall to me. If they would have just played it cool and kept quiet, I may have sided with them much more here, but since they want to make this all about identity politics and SJW issues again, I'm going to have to finish things off and side with Martin Scorsese once again. What do you guys think? Are Marvel movies cinema? Does Martin Scorsese not understand Black Panther because of his background? And which movies would you rather see in the theaters coming up soon? A classic Martin Scorsese film or another recycled plot from a Marvel Cinematic Universe one? Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see y'all next time.